Welcome to the Water is Life podcast, where we discover how to flow from feeling dry, stuck, stagnant, and dehydrated to feeling juicy, crystal clear, and quenched. Because water is life, and getting to know water is life-changing. I invite you to surf the deep mysteries of our liquid source of life, from practical health strategies to philosophical explorations of water as a vessel of consciousness, so that you can experience the empowerment of being a living body of water starting today. Are you ready? Grab a glass of water and let's dive in. Today we'll be chatting with Chris Sanborn. Chris is the lead visionary for Alive Water and Find a Spring. Chris strives to live a life immersed in nature, deepening an ever-growing relationship with water. Spearfishing, sailing, and hunting wild game and cold and hot springs are some of his favorite things. He's also engaged in planting and cultivating exotic fruit and flower trees for his friends, family, and future generations. I have so much respect for what Chris has cultivated with Alive Water and the legacy that he's continuing with Find a Spring. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with Chris Sanborn. Before we get our feet wet with this week's topic, make sure you're subscribed so you always get the current episode. And if you take a minute to write a review, this helps others to find this wellspring of hydrating wisdom too. I pour out my thanks to you for taking the time to water this podcast so it can grow by sharing your review. Oh, Chris, welcome to the Water is Life podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here with us today.
I'm so happy you're doing this podcast. I can't think of a better person. And I've always thought, oh, maybe I should do a water podcast, but it's a lot of work putting on a podcast. So I'm happy you're doing it.
Thanks. I'm happy I'm doing it too. It's been a long time in the making for sure. And I've got so many amazing water friends and colleagues all around the world. And we just have the best water conversations in general. And there's so many times that I just think, I wish someone had recorded that. There's so many gems. In that light, I would love to pick your brain today and for the benefit of the listeners, just hear a bit about your water journey and your water discoveries, because you have truly been a beacon of bringing high quality, raw, living, wild water to people who would otherwise not be able to access it. And that is such a gift and such a service to the world. So how did you first start getting into spring water? When did you first start harvesting raw water? What first sparked your interest in that?
The first time I had water straight from the earth, I remember it very vividly. I was with my grandpa in the North Georgia mountains, and it was actually, I don't even know if it was a spring. I just remember it being like a really clear stream. And I remember him drinking from it and showing me that was possible and just being shocked, and thinking back on it now, it's so fascinating because we're so far removed from that experience that it was like shocking to me, and like such a memory that's so intact for me because it was just such a like shock on my reality. Whoa, you can like actually drink water that's not out of a faucet or a plastic water bottle. And I didn't really think about much about it after that for years. Maybe fast forward to a decade later, I was living in California and super into that health scene over there. And yeah, just wanting to get even healthier, studying organic food and medicine and all that kind of stuff. And then David Wolf and Daniel Vitalis were talking about spring water and like the power of real spring water. And they also educated me on the fact that almost all spring waters that you buy in the store are processed with UV light and or ozone gas for shelf stability, which kills healthy microbes, probiotics. Daniel Vitalis had created the site findaspring.com, and I went on there to go and find a local spring to just try it out for myself. And took me a minute to find one that was like really good, but I still remember that experience also very vividly. Was up in Big Bear, like 3 hours outside of California. So it was quite a drive and a trek to get there. But yeah, it was just such a cool experience, like being up in the mountains and seeing where the water was like actually coming out of the earth, like all ice cold. And I remember it was like at the initial moment of drinking the water, I didn't really feel anything like super extraordinary. But then maybe like a few hours later, actually, we just went to some restaurant and it was just such an interesting feel. Like I felt almost like I was high. And this is a moment in my life when I was completely sober. And it was just like, whoa, there is like something here to this. There's something really special about this. And yeah, I felt amazing and kept drinking it. And then, yeah, I just wanted to share that experience with more people.
That's beautiful. It really is an an experience unlike people are accustomed to. Like there's something too when we call it living water, it brings us alive in a different way and it's subtle, but it's very noticeable, especially the first few times that you start drinking it. It's very noticeable. So when after that, because it sounds like that really sparked something for you, sparked a fascination, and I'm sure it probably sparked a habit of starting going to go to springs more often. So, when did you start really falling in love with water and recognizing that there's more to water than people typically realize, that maybe our standard narrative about what water is probably isn't all that accurate?
Mm, it's been such a beautiful journey and learning for me. You know, there's always so much more to learn. And yeah, just over the years of finding awesome springs and like getting to hunt for them, it's led me into just such a greater appreciation for nature as well. Like you go to a spring, and there's lots of things that you get to see that maybe you wouldn't otherwise. Beautiful birds or animals or certain plants that you can harvest and eat. And yeah, I think it's just something where my love deepens more and more with water. Actually, something for me that is really my most intimate relationship with water right now in my life is spearfishing and free diving and like getting to like really play in the water.
Mm.
It's become just such a healing thing for me to reconnect with also like that piece of my food, like seeing that process of life for the fish that I eat and getting to see beautiful coral and push myself and just feel the water all around me in that way. Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, I love free diving too. I think it's addictive. It's like you completely transform when you're in that other world down there. The mammalian dive reflex kicks in, and suddenly you're no longer a terrestrial land animal. You just become this completely different aquatic organism, and your brain waves start to change, and it's really its own type of meditation. Of course, the pranayama aspect of the breath holds, engages a lot of that altered state of consciousness and kind of that trance state, but then you're also just in this alien world, and your heartbeat slows down so much and your cognitive process shifts so much, and it's one of my favorite things in the world, to be honest. So I love that you do that as well. I've never tried the spearfishing part of it though. I bet that's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, it really is. It feels so transformative. Like afterwards, you feel like kind of a high. But yeah, it's nice to also have like That's kind of the cool thing about like foraging for your own water or food or meat. It's like going into nature with kind of like a mission and a purpose instead of just like hiking around aimlessly, which can be totally beautiful and special in its own way as well. But it's just, it's you kind of deepen your love and appreciation and respect for nature when when you have that direct access and you see how nature is providing it to you in that
Mhm.
way and being part of that web of life and understanding it deeper.
Friends, are you thirsty for spring water in its purest, wildest form, untouched by chemicals or processing, but maybe you don't have a nearby spring where you can harvest your own? We've got you covered with Alive Waters. They deliver fresh, raw, unprocessed spring water straight from a pristine, natural primary spring right to your doorstep. This water is wild and undomesticated, just like nature intended, packed with minerals and full of life force energy. And the best part? It's delivered in stunning, eco-friendly Flower of Life glass bottles designed to energize the water even further with sacred geometry. Delivery is available in Austin, San Antonio, Miami, San Francisco, LA, Portland, and New York. If you're not in one of those areas, no worries, you can still order their beautiful Flower of Life glassware from anywhere. Just head over to waterislife.shop for all the details and use the code WaterIsLife for 15% off your order. Absolutely. And that's something that I really wanted to touch on with you for people as well as that aspect of communion. So, can you share a little bit more about the pilgrimage of going to a spring and what it's like to really establish that personal relationship, that kind of reciprocal dynamic with nature where, instead of harvesting our bloodstream, because water really is our external bloodstream, instead of getting our bloodstream from a plastic bottle where we're paying a corporation for our blood, or we get our water from the municipal tap supply where we're paying the government for our blood, instead, we're reestablishing that natural order. Just as God intended, water flows from the earth and we drink it straight from the earth. We're making our blood from the blood of the earth with no middlemen in between. And for myself, and also with some clients that I've worked with, even just that ritual act of making the pilgrimage to a spring and establishing that relationship is, in and of itself, one of the most transformative things because you really develop this sense of sovereignty.
Mm,
And it's completely energetic. It's like this sense of, I know where I come from. I know where my water comes from. I know where my blood comes from. I know where my food comes from. And you're not reliant on these external powers that be. You're not reliant on the matrix for your sustenance. And not only is there this wildness and this vitality to the water itself, which gives your blood and your self expression this more non domesticated feeling, but you're really reestablishing that sense of sovereignty and autonomy and connection with the mother that so
mhm.
many of us are completely missing. So can you speak a little bit to that relationship that's formed?
Yeah, I think you said it so beautifully, and I would add to that as well. It's like connecting with our ancestors. It's like our species has been drinking this kind of unprocessed water from the earth for 99.9% of our existence and having this connection. And it's only in the last maybe 100 years that we've started to lose that connection. So yeah, there's just something so primally satisfying about collecting your own water, and you get a little bit of exercise, some lifting, and sometimes you got to hike a little bit or figure out a solution to pipe the spring down if it's up the mountain a little bit. And it's like a fun puzzle. Even finding a spring sometimes can be a bit of an adventure. On Find a Spring, there is directions, and now that I've taken over as the executive director of Find a Spring, we definitely encourage people to add maps and photos of really clear directions. But even with that, sometimes it can be a bit of a journey to find it. And it's fun, it's like very satisfying once you do find that spring that you really love, that really has a good flow rate, that's like easy to access. Or so, sometimes too, just go into a spring. There's this one where I live in Kauai, Makaleha Spring, and there's a spring like past that, and you gotta hike like at least an hour with like multiple river crossings, and you can't collect that, bring out that much water in that scenario, but it's just such a beautiful journey, and the energy at this spring is like nowhere else in the world. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun discovering cold springs like that. And, of course, now we're trying to focus more on adding more hot springs as well. And, a lot of these hot springs on our planet have been revered for their healing properties for thousands of years. And in Europe, and Japan, they have like like recognized medical healing properties. Like doctors will prescribe you like, oh, you need to go to this hot spring, depending on, if you have this ailment or that ailment. And, if for anyone who's listening who's ever been to a hot spring, I'm sure they've felt that high after a really good hot spring soak. And yeah, it's a lot of fun being able to experience that component of communing with the water as well.
It's so true. Every spring, every hot spring and cold spring has its own unique properties, and you could almost say its own unique personality. They each definitely have their own very specific energy when you visit them. And I love that you brought up that some are much more accessible than others. And sometimes it really is a pilgrimage, it really is a trek. I've had numerous people ask me, and this is not really my forte of expertise. So I would love if you can share with the audience because you are a master at this. What do you do when you find a spring that is not tapped yet? How do you actually develop a spring? How do you caretake a spring? How do you steward a spring? I feel like in past generations, this was a much more common knowledge, and our ancestors really stewarded these sacred places as legacies to their lineage. And within just the past few generations, we've stopped caretaking these sacred spaces. And so a lot of springs have fallen into disrepair and have dried up. And it's so important when you do find a spring, not only to make sure that the water is accessible, to pipe it, to tap it, but also to make sure that it's shaded, that it's well cared for. So, what are your spring care 101 tips?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I think it's so awesome when you can go and find a spring, which is it's findaspring.org now, because we turned it into a nonprofit. And just, there's a great spring that's like close, and hopefully someone's posted test results for it, and comes back really clean and it's easy to access. But yeah, a lot of places there just hasn't been good springs discovered close to where people are, or they haven't put them on Find a Spring yet. So in my experience, I've found probably a dozen different springs through US Forest Service maps, which are easily accessible nowadays through apps like All Trails. It's a popular hiking app for those that don't know, which is another really cool app that I would definitely recommend. But like within that app, you can do a map overlay. And a lot of these springs, when they were plotting the geography of our country, they realized the importance of them. So they put these springs on the map, and you can go and find these springs. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not as good. you know, to me, what constitutes a really good spring is a good flow rate when it's nice and cold as well. It's like less of a chance for things to grow, like unwanted microbes, and also away from any potential industrial age contamination. Of course, we kind of have to say you should test every spring before you drink out of it. And I do think it is a good advice, especially if it's spring you're going to be drinking every day, then it does make sense. You can go on Find a Spring and get a test kit, discounted test kit, and then post the results for the community. That's such a great way to give back. That being said, I've drank from so many springs that like were just, oh yeah, like that's coming right out of a rock. Like
Mhm.
I'm in the wilderness. There's no way something like an animal couldn't have pooped inside of this rock where the water is coming out. Um,
Same. I've not tested way more springs that I've tested.
yeah.
Tested very few of the springs that I've ever drunk from, to be
Yeah, and
honest.
I've never had an issue.
Me either. Never. And I
Mm,
think it's given me a lot more microbiome diversity in general because I
mm,
tend to have a lot more resilience. I mean, I've lived in third world countries and I've visited all over the place, and I tend to never get any of the gut issues that other people tend to,
mm,
Bali belly or, when you're out at Lake Atitlan and everyone seems to get gut issues. And I think that just drinking from so many different springs over the years, you just develop a really wide biodiversity of gut flora and gut fauna that I
mm.
think just gives you a stronger resilience and a stronger immune system in general.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a good point. I think I've heard scientists say 90% of our serotonin, like the feel-good happy chemical, is in our guts. So if you can be drinking the Earth's naturally created probiotics in every sip of water, like it's kind of crazy not to be doing that.
Absolutely. And
Uh,
that's what our biology expects of us. Like for
mhm,
countless millennia, this is what our ancestors drank. We were getting those probiotics in our system. And now it's the exact opposite. People drink water that has chlorine in it, which is a biocide that literally creates a little
mhm.
mini genocide of your gut flora every time you drink it. So it's not only are you not getting a probiotic, you're getting an antibiotic. You're getting a biocide when you drink that water. It's so
Yeah.
backwards now.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up drinking so much tap water. I don't know if you did too, but
Oh
yeah, just
yeah,
drink
same.
out of the hose and the sink.
Mm.
Yeah, it's just so wild. At least there's more awareness now, but yeah, it's still wild to me how many people drink out of like single-use plastic bottles. And it's like with, the plastic leaching of that is, it seems like that's becoming more and more knowledge too, though. I love that nowadays we're seeing a lot more people with those like metal reusable bottles. Like those are becoming really popular, so that's cool.
Reusable containers are coming into the mainstream. Filtration is definitely in the mainstream. I think a lot of people are aware to some extent that they need to shift their water, but still not a lot of people have that basic, just gut instinct that water should come from the earth. I think at this point in time, we're still so domesticated that we think that even if you filter it, it should come from a tap, or, even if you get it from one of those dispensers to put in your portable bottle, it comes from a store. And we really need to restore this primal instinct that
Hmm.
water is from the earth. That's where it comes from, that it's not dirty, that it's not
Hmm.
contaminated, Of course, that there are places where, we're not suggesting anybody just go harvest from, a stagnant lake or anywhere in a random river, but springs are entirely different. Can you speak to that a little bit about exactly what is it about the geology of a spring that it's coming up straight from the aquifer, and so it is for the most part protected from runoff and leaching and these other kinds of things.
Yeah, I would love to answer that. And also just to go back to your question too, like I was saying, like kind of how you can find a good spring if it's not on Find a Spring, but also like how to pipe it too
Mm.
is an important skill. And I've done it quite a few different ways. I'll just give an example of two. In Maui, one time I found this really cool spring, beautiful, just like coming right out of the rock, and that's what to me constitutes like a really good spring. If it's like coming right out of a rock, like at elevation, then it's probably not coming from a stream somewhere else and then going underground and then coming back out. Like it's actually coming from this deep underground aquifer, where the water has percolated through the sand and all of these other types of rocks that have given it this mineral and charge from the rocks and crystals in the earth.
Friends, are you thirsty for spring water in its purest, wildest form, untouched by chemicals or processing, but maybe you don't have a nearby spring where you can harvest your own? We've got you covered with Alive Waters. They deliver fresh, raw, unprocessed spring water straight from a pristine, natural primary spring right to your doorstep. This water is wild and undomesticated, just like nature intended, packed with minerals and full of life force energy. And the best part? It's delivered in stunning, eco-friendly Flower of Life glass bottles designed to energize the water even further with sacred geometry. Delivery is available in Austin, San Antonio, Miami, San Francisco, LA, Portland, and New York. If you're not in one of those areas, no worries, you can still order their beautiful Flower of Life glassware from anywhere. Just head over to waterislife.shop for all the details and use the code WaterIsLife for 15% off your order.
And yeah, with this spring, I basically just got a 5-gallon trash bin from a hardware store. And, it was just plastic. It's not, ideally, it would have been metal, but plastic's easy to drill into. And the water was only in there for maybe, a minute tops while it made its way down the hill. I just connected like some tubing to this trash can. And then it was just this awesome way that this spring was then piped down to easy access right off of the road. And another time, actually in Ojai, there was a spring, Bellyache Springs, as it's known. Funny enough, I think the story there is that the pioneers like drank so much that their belly ached or something. I don't know, but pretty good water. But it comes out like 500 feet up from the road out of this pipe that someone piped just very close to the spring. So that what we did there was it was actually like a glass 5-gallon bucket. And then we had a hose. We had 500-foot pieces of hose that we ran from that bucket after the bucket, like as the bucket was getting filled by the spring, we ran the hose and like then ran the hose all the way down the hill. So those are like kind of more difficult circumstances. And a lot of times when you do, like other times, like when you find a spring, like you can just kind of, if it's something that a lot of people haven't used in a long time, like you can kind of just help clear out some of the debris around it, like that might have collected, or dig out a little hole so that so like a vessel can sit down and inside right next to the spring. I know that was kind of a lot of info, but then yeah, just to go back to what constitutes a spring, yeah, I think there's a lot of different levels of spring water quality, of course. We have a spring water delivery service in metropolitan areas, Alive Water, as you know, for people who just don't have the time or there's not good springs super close to the cities a lot of times. So with that, we really made a big effort to try and source the best springs. And I think those are primary water springs, which is this idea that the earth actually has this chemical reaction in the crust and it can create its own water and then pressurize it and send it to the surface. So it's like this water that's never been on the surface of the earth before. No, so there's no industrial age contamination, no radioactive fallout. And I think it's also this cool idea that the earth has this system of being able to clean itself in a way, which gives me a lot of hope because it's it's providing this super pure water and kind of flushing out the toxins for itself. So that, that would constitute kind of like the best spring. And then there's also other springs that are also can be just as good or almost just as good that are like kind of what I alluded to that are just maybe in an aquifer that then comes out on its own accord with gravity, which I think is a beautiful thing as well. It's like the earth is like offering itself in this perpetual motion and not something that we have to like, not like a stagnant aquifer that we're like, like a well that we're like pumping up, which can be really good water too. But I think there's something just special about that spring that's just like springing out of the earth in this way that it has for hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years in this same way.
It is really special. And what have you seen? What kind of differences have you seen in people when they start drinking this water? Have you seen healings take place? Have you seen people's shift in their mood and their mentality, this sort of thing?
Yeah, I whenever I'm having a bad day, I like to just go look on the reviews page on alivewaters.com just to see like how big of an impact the water has made on people's health. Sometimes I forget because I'm like not the one collecting the water and actually bringing it to everyone's door nowadays. But yeah, I mean, people have spoke about it healing really bad skin conditions and all sorts of stuff, like all sorts of ailments. Like it's pretty remarkable and profound, like what the difference it makes just, shifting our drinking water. And yeah, it's really fascinating to me that there's like such a big movement for people to get away from processed foods, but I think most people still don't even realize the reality of processed water and the difference there.
Absolutely. It's so healing. Water is life. You want to change your life, change your water. It's
Mm,
simple.
hmm
So here's a question that is fundamentally unanswerable, but I'm going to pose it to you anyways. What is water?
Have you seen that video? I'm sure you probably have. What if water is God? Yeah, so I mean
I love that.
that would definitely be the one of the things that water is for sure. I mean, it's, it gives life to everything and it's connects us all as well. We all have this water that's circulating through us, leaves us, and then goes through everything else on the planet. I think water is also like this fun thing that wants to play with us. Yeah, something that I think is really interesting is if you look at a good spring water and that has a good bit of silica in it, which is like the rare beauty mineral. It's like really good for our hair, skin, and nails. And a lot of the best springs will have a high silica content. And if you let that water sit for a while, I don't know, maybe you've seen this before, you'll have to let me know. The silica will actually form these rainbow crystals. It freaks people out all the time. They're like, "Oh, there's something in my water. It's like swirling around." Like I've seen it in so many different springs, but yeah, it's like it forms these beautiful like rainbow crystals. And I love to think about that concept that we're like drinking, you know, rainbow crystals, and that's our essence in a
Mm,
way.
Yeah. And those really are some of the highest quality springs in the world. Like you look at the water from the Hunza region in Pakistan. I mean, these people lived to be well into their hundreds. It was rare for someone in this area to not be a centenarian. And it wasn't uncommon even for women to give birth over the age of 100. Like they considered it Shangri-La. And Dr. Henry Kowanda and Dr. Patrick Flanagan went up there to study what is it about? Is it their lifestyle? Is it their diet? Is it what's making these people, thrive well into their hundreds? I mean, you'll have, 4 or 5 or 6 generations of family members all standing side by side because they don't die till they're 200 years old. We have to study this. So between those two scientists, they ended up studying it for 60 years. And of course, many anthropologists had gone to see what was the answer. But the people from that region were very clear. They said it's because of the water that we drink. So
Mm.
Kawanda and Flanagan studied that water, and they found that among several other amazing aspects of it, it was really high in this type of organified silica. And they developed crystal energy drops, which are sort of an external version of that. If
Oh,
you
is
want
that what
to,
those are?
that's what those are. Yeah. If you go to
Uh,
waterslife.shop, look up crystal energy drops, and you can put some organified silica in your water and make it a little bit more like those magic springs. And then I think there's one in Peru as well, I want to say, that's really high in silica, and people live an incredibly long time there. So definitely the blue zones get more silica, more rainbow crystals in your water.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's this beautiful mystery water that always has more to teach us and mysteries to uncover.
Absolutely. And if water had one message for us, what do you think that would be?
Enjoy it. Enjoy
Hmm.
it in its best forms.
Hmm. I love that. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing today with us, Chris. Where can folks find you and stay in touch with what you're up to?
Findaspring.org and alivewaters.com and chrissanborn.com.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone will look you up. And as always, if you go to waterslife.shop and search Alive Waters, you can find a discount code there. Use the code WatersLife on alivewaters.com and get 15% off your first purchase. And I hope you will, because there's nothing like drinking raw, living spring water. And these guys don't only just deliver wild spring water, they have the most beautiful glassware, stunning flower of life, geometric designs etched into these beautiful carafes and dispensers and cups and just beautiful glassware. So go check that out for sure. And thank you everyone so much for listening and for tuning in today. You all have a beautiful day. Be well and be water, my friend. Friends, if you're loving what you're learning on the podcast and you want to dive deeper, check out the courses, webinars, workbooks, and private coaching available at waterslife.academy. These are on-demand, lifetime access programs where we dive into brand new concepts not taught here on the podcast. And if you're ready to optimize your water to be a healthy wellspring of hydration, discover the water alchemy tools that are available at waterslife.shop. And let's connect on Instagram at Jen Isabel Friend. I look forward to seeing you there. Stay hydrated and be well.